Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Caregiver Coffee Shop podcast. I am beyond excited to have my girl Suzanne with me today, Suzanne Culberg. She is a busy mom, she's an author, she's a speaker, and she's also your NOPE coach. And she is your NOPE coach for saying no to being a martyr, being a maid in our roles as busy moms and caregivers. And I am so excited that she is here to give us her knowledge to help us say nope to being a maid or a martyr. And it was so interesting. Right before we started this interview, I told Suzanne that she's going to be preaching to her girl today because I'm in that season where I have a daughter that's getting out of toddler age and headed towards preschool and kindergarten, and she is still taking naps, but I know that's not going to be forever. And I have things kind of going up a notch too in my personal life with my husband's health, my dad's health. So I'm a sandwich generation caregiver, and I'm also still trying to grow my business, and the season that I'm in that works best for us all, so where they can rest and do what they need to do, is to work in the wee hours of the morning. So it means sometimes your girl runs on a lot of caffeine and water, but I'm being good right now. I have my water with me. So I'm working on my 90 ounces for the day. So I just encourage you guys for this conversation that we're about to have, that you just listen and just know that you're not the only one. You're not a bad mom. You're not a bad caregiver if you're in a season where you're kind of feeling stuck between being a martyr or a maid. But without further ado, Suzanne, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to start with saying how much I love you framed it as a season, because I think so many of us, we think this is my life. And the seasons analogy, I actually use that a lot in my work, is a great way to frame it, because if you think of, I love it, farmers, when I know absolutely nothing about growing anything, but I use this analogy.
I love it.
Sometimes there's a flood, or there's a fire, or there's some pests, and that crop for that season does not yield what the person was expecting, and they might bemoan that their business is over and farming's not for them and all this sort of stuff, but they pick up and they carry on and they keep going, and they have reserves more than they ever knew that they had. I'm not saying this is a great thing, but I'm just saying, framing it, this season is, one that's particularly challenging, I think can take a lot of the pressure off many people.
Right. Yeah. And I like what you say about seasons too. Like, even just logistically, I mean, right now in the US, I live in Southern Idaho. And so we've been dealt with some really cold, not a torrential amount of snow, thank heavens, or rain, but it's been very cold, very, very cold. For someone that has chronic illnesses itself, like hypothyroidism, my circulation isn't good. And so I feel it and I ache, and I'm just ready for it to be over with. But again, it's a season. Spring is coming. So
we're the opposite. I can't wait for winter. Like, I
know,
remember
right?
some parts of US, you guys have got Ice-mageddon, people are saying. And
Yes.
I'm like, well, here it's just so hot. I literally wrote a post yesterday. I'm ready for winter. That is all.
Your girl's the opposite. Girl, I am so ready for spring and summer. And yeah, but going back to what we're talking about, seasons, whether it's with a season of your health, a season with the age of your children, because let's face it, raising children at different ages has their own challenges and struggles and frustrations. Seasons of your marriage where you're kind of struggling with those earlier years where the kids do need more of your time, but then where's time for you guys? That's kind of the trick. And to find that healthy balance with nurturing that piece, because before your children came into the picture, it was just you and your partner or your spouse. And that's you're going to go back to that after your kids are grown. So how do you still keep that relationship healthy and alive so you don't end up in a divorce after the kids are grown? Because that does happen. So, and I've seen that personally happen in my life. So there's all these different seasons, all these different ways that we could just martyr ourselves to death of going, oh, woe is me, or I have to do everything. I cannot take breaks. I cannot prioritize myself. I cannot still pursue my own gifts and talents and dreams and still be a mom and still be a caregiver and still be a business owner. So Suzanne, help us with this. Okay. Share a little bit first about what you do, though. I think that would help our listeners. First, we'll do that, and then segue into a little bit about how you can help us just say no to being a martyr and a maid.
I'd love to. So my name's Suzanne Culberg. I'm from Sydney, Australia. So if you're listening from the US or Canada or even the UK, I am from the future. It's looking good.
I love it.
I am the Nope coach, Nope, Nope. And the reason is I used to be an exploding doormat, like a people pleaser who would say yes to everybody else and no to myself, until I got so frustrated that I would just lose it at people. Why don't you ever consider me? Oh, after all I do for you. And I just realized that something needed to change about that, because you get to a point where you're just exhausted, and I hesitate to use the term burnout because I think it's often overused, but where you're just done. And the answer isn't in Netflix or staying up late or eating junk food, unfortunately.
Right.
And as uncomfortable as it is, starting to say no, starting to set boundaries, starting to advocate for yourself. And I think particularly for caregivers and mothers, we spend so much time advocating for our children and advocating for the person that we're looking after. We don't have much juice left for ourselves. But that age-old saying, fit your own oxygen mask first, the airplane lines, they got it going on in that regard. Where you
Right.
don't look after yourself first and you burn yourself into the ground, you have nothing left. Literally, your tank is empty. And what kind of model are you making for your children? Because we all know, we can tell our children, eat your healthy stuff, while we're snarfing chocolate in the cupboard, and they just know.
Me
They
too.
know. It was so funny yesterday. There was this rattling sound. My son's ears peeped up. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm getting the yogurt sachets out of it. And he's like, oh, I thought you were eating chocolate. And I was like, keen ears, but no. So it's just, about doing that and relearning that skill, because we have that skill as a toddler age. Toddlers are premier at saying no to everything.
Right.
And then somewhere along the line, we become good girls and we follow the conditioning, and then we kind of lose ourselves, and it's about reclaiming that. So that's the work that I do.
Right. I love that. So share a little bit about your journey then. So you've been through, the whole reason you're on this episode of the podcast is, you've been there. You've been to the point where you are, like you said, burned out, tapped out, empty tank, nothing to give. So how did you get yourself out of that? How did you start saying, because when we've been in that season for so long, that ruts of so long of not saying no, it's not easy to just instantly start saying no though either.
Yeah, no,
So
it's not.
it's not a
the way
habit.
I did it, do not recommend.
Oh, great.
Because I didn't have a Nope coach. I didn't have a me. So what I think happens for many people is, when we have been at the end of the spectrum where we feel like the doormat, or we've allowed people to walk all over us, we can often pendulum to the other way and inadvertently say no to everything, and not in a healthy way. And, from our place of exhaustion and exasperation. And we can set so many boundaries that we end up actually isolating ourselves and not able to ask for help. So then we're like, well, this sucks just as much as the other one. So then we pendulum back. So for me personally, there was a lot of times where I had reached past the point of overgiving, where I was just done. And I'll be honest, I kind of lashed out at people. I can see that now. At the time, I thought I was being reasonable. So I can think of one example. There was this one friend, and also too, for anyone listening, when you are overgiving and people pleasing, I think for many of us, it doesn't start out that way. People are like, could you just? And you're like, sure. And then an unexpected precedent can kind of be formed. Oh, she did it last time, she won't mind. Oh, she won't mind. And then we do more and more and more and more. And if we'd actually spoke up in any of one of those cases and said, hey, I know I said yes before, it's actually too much for me, or communicated our needs in any way. And in this example, I'll share it. I'll throw myself under the bus. I had a friend, she lived in the same suburb that I did. She did not have a car. We had children who were the same age. I only had my older child at that stage. And I noticed her at the supermarket. She was catching the bus. And I was like, catching a bus with a toddler to get your groceries? Like, man, that must be challenging. So I offered, I'm like, hey, when I take my daughter Xanthi to get groceries, would you like me to pick you up? And I can take you too. So she'd install her son's car seat next to my daughter's car seat, and off we go. And we had a little system. My grocery bags would be open, hers would be tied off. So when we got back, we knew whose was whose. It was great. Where it became not great was then she'd be like, oh, it's the middle of the week and I need a top up. Can you take me to the store? And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I get it. And then it'd be like, oh, I feel like this. Can you just take me to the bottle shop? Or I feel like this. Can you just take me to the park? Or I need this appointment. And it got to the point where I was literally taking this woman somewhere like every day or every other day. And I remember being out and people were like shocked, but you don't realize, like, you just a yes here, a yes there. And I was out at our mum's group. At that stage, we still met up once a week for coffee or at the park or something. And I'd gone into the bathroom and I overheard her chatting to another friend. They didn't know I was there. And she was like, oh, Suzanne will do it for me. She's my little, I don't know if you're allowed swearing on this show, but she's my little bee. And I was
Oh
like,
dear.
oh. And then I went completely the other way and kind of, I didn't storm out of the toilet block and lose it, but I had some choice words to say. I kind of stewed on it, but long story short, my role in that is if I had any one of those times actually said, this is becoming too much, I'm happy to do it once a week. Like if I had, from a healthy place, instilled some boundaries, it would have been a lot different situation than when I felt taken advantage of and whatever and kind of lost it. So
Right. Boundaries are a tricky thing, guys. I know we've talked about this on other episodes too. And if you follow me on social media or on my email list, girl, you know that I am harping on boundaries. And boundaries are not a bad thing. Okay. Boundaries are a good
boundaries are a
thing.
great thing.
Boundaries are a good thing. Okay. We need boundaries to be able to have that blocked out time. What do I say? 15-minute breaks throughout the day. So whether it's to refill your tumbler, to get 15 minutes of movement outside, just even if it's just for a walk or playing in the backyard with your children, if it's just if you're needing 15 minutes to journal in the morning or do your daily devotional or something. I blocked out before I even do my office hours Monday through Friday, before I even started doing stuff for the podcast or emails or answering any of that kind of stuff this morning. I had my hour to hour, it went a little longer to an hour and a half, but I gave myself that. I got up early enough to where I gave myself that cushion so I could just really spend time in my lesson and journaling and just spending time with the Lord, because that is a boundary I set in place that I need to do every day, because that sets the tone for my day. How are you setting the tone for your day? Before the night with like maybe a consistent bedtime, pre-setting up your coffee pot, laying out, or for me, I lay out my little reusable coffee tumbler or tea cup or coffee tumbler the night before with my tea bag of choice. I'm not making as much noise. I'm ready to go. I lay out my clothes. All those things, even though it seems like little things, it helps you get through and jumpstart your day because then you're ready to go. Planning out your week. I've been learning how to use Notion because my business coach really has fallen in love with that. And I love the templates. And I really am just finally understanding, like with anything, you make it your own. And so she gave us some amazing templates. And so there's a weekly planning template in there, but I like to have checklists throughout the day. And doing the daily ones just seems like a little bit more brain work for me because then I have to segment each day. But I want to have it kind of all together so I'm not having as many tabs. So what I did last night is I realized, why am I overthinking this? Your girl's making it way too complicated. So I just took the weekly template. I went to the master copy, edited some changes to where I have my must get done, if I have time this week to get done list. And then I scrolled down and I just made a section that's called my daily checklist to-dos. And then I went Monday through Friday and I just made little sections. So now I can just open it every day, scroll down to the day. And then also throughout the week, I have my weekly things that I have to do. I can check those off. It's all in one place. It's less overwhelming. That's me. And that sets me up for success for getting stuff done throughout the week with my business. Same thing with your health. Habit trackers. What can you do to check off, not to just check stuff off for the heck of it, but to keep yourself accountable about, okay, did I stop and pause to get my 15 minutes of movement in today? Did I drink my 90 ounces of water? At least I'm using me as an example, guys. That's how much I need to drink a day for a healthy body weight for hydration. Did I spend my time with the Lord? What can you do to set a healthy boundary to where you have a set amount of time every day, even if it's just for 15 minutes or longer, depending on what you can do in the season you're in, realistic season you're in, to nurture yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And so you don't end up as a maid. You don't end up as a martyr where you burn the candle at both ends. Because that's really what we're trying to avoid. When you say, Suzanne, we're trying to, that's where it requires a little bit of work, and it might take some trial and error to figure out what works for you. So just slowing down and realizing that something needs to change is the critical first step, wouldn't you say?
100%, Melissa. And I love how you made the point of what works for you, because for some people, checklists make them want to die inside. And
I
if that
know.
is you, that is okay. There are other ways. There's so many ways to do this. I think sometimes we adopt somebody else's because it worked for them, and then we beat ourselves up and commit verbal violence against ourselves because it doesn't work for us. And it's like, oh, but the concept or the theory underneath, that's sound. I just have to find the way that it works for me and what's motivating for me and what, lights me up. I am a child at heart. I love to color in. So I set my habits. I have no more than 4, so I don't overwhelm myself. I call them my pennies. I put them on a little chart, and at the end of each day when I've done them, I color them in. And what I love about that is it brings back my, inner child. And the other thing is, when I'm having a moment, because we all invariably have the moments where we're like, I'm not doing enough, I'm not enough, I'm a failure, results aren't here, like, and so on and so forth. I can look at my beautifully colored piece of paper and go, I might not be there yet. Like, I might not have the end result yet, but here's the evidence that I've planted the seeds, back to seasons, that I love, that I'm not a gardener, but the seeds are planted, like, it's coming. I've been doing the things. Or the other way, because we tend to have the confirmation bias where I'm telling myself I'm doing all the things, and like, life sucks and the world's out to get me, and you look at your chart and you're like, you're not doing the things. Like, it's an honesty check.
Yeah.
But if you're not doing the things, then why? Are the things no longer lighting you up? Are they no longer giving you that feel of achievement? Are they no longer relevant to your goals? Like, it allows me to, once a month or so, now it's more like once a quarter, recheck, are these the things that I want to focus on? And if not, what else instead? Rather than, letting my mind put me in all sorts of drama
Yeah.
that isn't in service.
Right. And that's why debriefs are so important too. Like, my coach has us do weekly, daily, and monthly debriefs, quarterly debriefs. I mean, just stopping and just journaling and brain dumping it out, writing it out. And again, whatever works for you, whether you want to do it digitally and softwares like Notion, Airtable, Trello, Asana, or if you want to, or even your Google Calendar, or just a note app or journal app on your phone, or if you like to use an actual notebook, like I like to do, and journal that way, that works too. Okay, just do it.
I love how you call it debriefs. I call it reviews. I've heard other people call it evaluations, whatever
Yes.
term that doesn't give you a word allergy. Like, to me, debrief, I think, ooh, it's kind of like, a debrief, like, what have I done wrong? Like, for me, that term. But like, even evaluation, I know a lot of people use that term, and I'm like, ooh, evaluation, yuck. I feel like I'm at work and somebody's telling me off about my KPIs. Like, no. But I'm like, review. Ooh, I can review what I've done. I can give myself a high five, but check in.
Check-in is a good one. A daily check-in, stopping and pausing. I had an episode with Sadie Teckler where we talked about spirituality and how, obviously, I'm a woman of faith and I practice the faith, but I know not everyone does that. But spirituality can look like different things. And spirituality really comes down to just stopping, pausing, breathing, and just checking in to see what your mind, soul, and body need in that moment. So just getting in that habit of stopping and checking in is critically important to even moving the needle forward in any element and area of your life. I love that
so much.
So, yeah, just stopping and pausing. When was the last time? So here's a question for you guys. When was the last time you stopped and paused? Seriously, like, really just stopped, dropped everything. I mean, not in the sense that you're stopping and you're spending hours doing it, but just stopping and listening to what your body needs. Are you feeling hungry? Go get a snack. Did you skip lunch today? Are you thirsty? Time to go refill your tumbler. Are you feeling off? Like, something's just off with you. Did you skip your wellness visit? Maybe it's time to go do that. Or maybe there's something else that's been going on that you put off. Because this was me back in 2021. I was sick a whole year with undiagnosed IBS because I did not do my wellness visit in 2020 when all hell was breaking loose with my husband's health and we had the pandemic going on. And I quit my job and was learning to be a stay-at-home mom, all the things. And that could have been avoided if I had kept up with my wellness visits when I started having symptoms instead of when it was a crisis mode and I couldn't take it anymore. because then my team had no clue what was going on. We were really starting from scratch and we had no idea what was going on. And it ended up adding more doctors to the team. I went from just going with working with my usual NP, and then adding a surgeon, adding
And I think that's such a great point there, Melissa,
and all these other
about
doctors.
your wellness visits. When you reach a point where it's past, like you haven't kept up your baseline, it can be so much more overwhelming to go, because then you're like, I know that there's going to be, I know that something's up, and then there's going to be potentially referrals to specialists. I know that there's going to be a cost associated with this, not just money, but time. Do I have somebody to look after my kids? What happens if I need this? That we can just not bother. Like, we can get so far in our heads about, well, I don't have time for me as it is, let alone I don't have time to be sick. And then we can sit on stuff a lot longer than, and also too, for me, and something that helped me out of that, so I'll offer that for anyone listening. If it was your child or your partner or someone else that you're caring for who was having this going on, you can bet you would stop in a second and have this sorted. You'd be on the phone immediately making that appointment. But why, like, oh, well, we don't have time for me or money for me or energy for me. It's like, and also, what's the long-term effect of this if there's something happening that you're not addressing? Because, if you get to a point where you do need specialist visits or maybe even hospitalization or something like that, it's going to be a lot more required for someone to come in and help with the children. So, putting ourselves first is often really hard, because we think, it's kind of like, imagine if you're a vehicle, the oil light's on, I should be fine. It'll keep going. And then all these lights are coming on the dashboard. I don't know if you guys call it a dashboard there.
Yeah, we call it a dashboard. Yeah.
So now you don't call it a boot and a bonnet like we do. It's a trunk.
I've never heard that.
hood.
I love that. That's different.
Because it's funny. The first time I read an American book, I was like, what's the boot? Isn't that a shoe? A trunk. Isn't that like a pair of shorts? Like we call it a boot, and you guys are like, it's a shoe. Anyway, I digress. You do call it a dashboard. But all these lights are on, and eventually, the cars, you have to pull over because there's something coming out from under the bonnet or the hood.
That's not good. It smells, and you see smoke, and it does not look good. No.
So you're the same. And I love the way that you framed it as wellness check in whatever way, because how often do we live our lives from the neck up? We don't actually pause and check in with what's going on in our body in any way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So just getting started can feel overwhelming in of itself. So we want our moms who are listening, caregivers who are listening, to quit self-sabotaging yourself. Okay, you're not a bad mom. You're not a bad caregiver. You're not a bad entrepreneur. If you're listening, are you listening to what Suzanne and I are telling you right now? Listen, stop. You're not bad, okay? You just need to get back on the bandwagon in a way that's realistic and works for you. So Suzanne, to help them take 3 baby steps forward, just simple shifts to even just get the ball going again. What would be 3 simple ways that we could encourage our moms who are listening, or caregivers who are listening, to get started with putting themselves first, to get them out of this ditch of being a martyr or being a maid?
Well, the first thing I'd recommend would be some form of inventory. And that sounds very hard, but we can't change what we don't acknowledge. So absolutely. Having a pen to paper, I love how you mentioned journaling, or document, word, voice noting, like whichever way suits for you. But where are you right now? Like, when is the last time that you had a wellness check or a health check or whatever? When's the last time that you did some movement that wasn't running after your kids or running out to an appointment? Like, what is your hydration level like? I remember a number of people I've worked with never actually consumed water. It was like tea or coffee, or soft drink. I think you guys call it pop. But do you both have some intentional water consuming? Like, just a basic, life wheel assessment of where you are now. And as you're doing that, notice the inner critic, the inner judge that wants to come up and berate you for all the things that you're doing wrong. Observation is power, judgment is weakness. So it's kind of like, we're just observing, what are we working with? Because we can't change what we don't acknowledge. And the other thing I'd recommend is don't go and change it all at once, because I think this is where so many of us come unstuck.
Yes.
We reach a point where we're so sick of ourselves that we're like, I can't do this anymore. And then we overhaul our life, like overnight or Monday, the universal day to change your life. And then a couple of days later, you might make it to Friday, but let's be realistic. By Wednesday afternoon, you're like, this is ridiculous. And you're throwing in the towel. So it's kind of like making a list, having a look at where you're at, where the changes need to happen, just so you have a starting point. And then picking, number 2 would be picking like your lowest hanging fruit, the easiest one. So for me, my lowest hanging fruit is always water. So whenever I'm like picking myself up from whether it be a tiny little backslide or a full-on ditch, it's like water, because I can get it anywhere. I can carry it with me. I can put it in it. I love how you've got the sip cup. I don't know what you're calling it, tumbler.
Yeah, it's a tumbler,
But
so it's just a reusable
I
tumbler.
have to, my kids are older now, but I still have a cup with a lid to save spills. But, you know, what is the easiest thing? And then for me, the next one is movement. I hate the term exercise. I have a word allergy to exercise because it makes me think of school and being forced to exercise. But, you know, move, because 10 minutes of, you know, intentional moving, whether it be a walk, like how often do we go, oh, I don't have time. I don't have time to do half an hour or 45 minutes. You got time to do 5, put on your shoes, go outside. Or if you've got your kids with you, take them to the park and walk around the outside. And then this is a whole boundary lesson, because they're, mummy, watch me, mummy, push me, mummy, this. And it's like, actually, this is mummy's time that you get to come along with. And then, you know, have this whole interaction and lesson. It's funny, I walk every day, once without my kids and once with. And then that time is our walking time, as in, you know, if we end up at a park and they want to play, I will walk around the outside. But no, I'm not pushing you on the swing or watching you on the slide at this instance. And it's just been, in the beginning, it was hard. But knowing that, you know, in the beginning, when you start to make these changes and say no and set boundaries, there's going to be a little bit of pushback, because they've been used to you pushing them. Like, I don't know about you, but I never liked the park, because it's like I take the kids to the park to tire them out, but I end up pushing them on the swing the whole time. Who's the one who's getting tired out here?
Well,
So
yeah, I love what you said about the parks. That's a good one. That's actually really interesting, because I do something similar. We have a park there's other parks, but the one that's my favorite is actually more like a 20-minute drive from us. But I love it because it has a huge outside loop that actually is paved, and it's actually, you know, people ride their bikes on it, walk their dogs on it. You know, it's amazing. And it takes us about 15 to 20 minutes to walk that loop. So I get some good movement in doing that. And I usually do that first, and then we go and play on the playground equipment. So to make it fair,
well, you can make it
and to see the
both in
ducks.
one.
Yeah. And so that's how I make sure I get my 15 minutes of movement in when we do go to the park, because there's also a duck pond, so my little girl enjoys that to make it fun. But then also too, think about where you live. We live in a subdivision that's amazing. It has swimming pools in it, and it also has a little mini park. It's not that big, but it still has some slides and stuff that you can play on. And then also too, we figured out, because we've lived here almost for 2 years now, so I like how the sidewalks are actually paved and kept up, and there's multiple little pathways. So we figured out like 2 routes that we can go. And so on some route days when the weather is a little bit more inclement, but we still want to get outside, we do the shorter loop. If we have more time and the weather, and it's also maybe a time crunch thing too, depending on what's going on. So maybe if the weather's better, we'll do the longer loop. And again, you know, one's about 10 to 15, the other one's like maybe more like 15 minutes. But either way, and I just want to interject here, shout out to my Christian coaches, Andrea and Aaron from Holy Healthy Christian Moms and Women at the Well Collective. Movement doesn't have to be just strictly one set of time. Okay, like just like Suzanne said, when I did my wellness wheel with my, because I'm doing an intensive program, the Women at the Well Collective, with my Christian life coach and Aaron, excuse me. And I like what she had us do was my wellness wheel. Like we looked at like 8 different areas of my life. And again, I'm not tackling all of them right now for Q1. I'm really focusing on low-hanging fruit. So my low-hanging fruit is water, continuing with my daily devotional time, and then reflections at the end of the day. Reflections or debriefs. I've been using a lot of reflections with my planner, with my journal. So I do that in the evenings, and I do a little bit in the morning too, to set my tone for the day. So that's my low-hanging fruit. And then again, the movement, again, doing a walk outside, depending on what's going on, or play at the park. And that's in my daily devotional time. So that's maybe like 3 or 4 of my 8. Do I want to work on more? Obviously, but I'm just starting there. And actually I will say, like, even with our finances, just starting slow with saving, you know, like, okay, we're in a season where we're on a fixed income, and my business is still a baby, and it's not exactly 6 figures yet, but I'm still being intentional with saving, X amount of dollars, X amount of times a month, and that builds momentum, and it creates a habit of like, we're being intentional with this money. We're treating our savings account like a bill, so we can be set up for success later on for other unexpected things. So it doesn't have to be all at once, like Suzanne was talking about. And certainly you can pick and choose in your season of what low-hanging fruit too is easiest you can do to be able to get the ball going. But also too, just I would say with that, pay attention to the low-hanging fruit that you might need the most. For me, it's definitely hydration, it's movement, it's nurturing my soul, it's in my body and my mind. It's certainly trying to start healthy habits, with staying aligned and being good stewards of what resources I do have, financially, and everything else in between. So
I love that. I love
so
that frame of being good stewards of what you have, because sometimes, when we focus on the lack, what we don't have, that's all we see. Because the thing is, the more that we get, the more that we want, the more,
mhm,
so it's like we're never actually making any ground. It's like, what is it, chasing the horizon or a mirage? It keeps getting further away. But it's like, what are the things that I already have, and appreciating those allows, allows for more from that place of desire rather than scarcity, when all we ever see is lack. So
right.
the third thing I was going to recommend is, working on your communication. And, this is where a lot of people fear. It's like, oh, if I say no, they might not like me. If I say no, they're not going to listen to me. If I say no, but the easiest way to practice I'd recommend is with people who don't yet know you. So when you first start to say no, especially to your children or your partner or people in your life, you get the kind of nascent eye roll and you're like, oh yeah, okay. And they just do it anyway. And it can become quite frustrating. So people setting boundaries with people who haven't met you yet, they don't know any other version of you. And, befriending the boundary, as you said, like boundaries are a good thing, because then people know what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable with you. And then they're not asking for too much, because they know that where your boundaries are. So for me, I struggled to say no to anything in the beginning. Like I remember I'd be in the supermarket or whatever, and the person's, they're trained to do the upsell. Do you want fries with that? Do you want a corn cob? Do you want a bag? It's 10 cents. I just like, yes, yes, yes. I just was unavailable to say no in any way, shape, or form. So choose something like that. Like when I go to the supermarket and they're like, do you want a 10-cent bag? No, thank you. Or, when I'm getting some food and they're offering something else, no, thank you, in those places. And then inside celebrate the, oh, yes, I did it. Or negotiating something like, if you saying you're having a meetup with a acquaintance, like probably not your bestie, but somebody. And I love how you mentioned, you guys like going to this park. Say you're meeting a friend and you're like, and they suggest somewhere that you don't really want to go to. How about here instead? Like, starting to negotiate. I think sometimes no isn't the end. No is the beginning. Like I can just imagine, like right now here, Titanic has just re-released at the cinema. My daughter, she was so keen to see it because she's obsessed with it. And so that in that case I did. But then it was funny, there's some other movies showing. My husband's more into horror. I am not in any way, shape, or form. So if he was like, hey, do you want to go and see Megan? I'd be like, no, thanks. But I love the offer. What else is showing? Like, so sometimes that no, so someone says, let's go here to a coffee shop, and you don't really particularly like that one. Where else could we go? It can be an opening if you so choose. And then also too, a level of honesty. Like if someone's like, I always use a Tupperware party example, but I used to be the one, if somebody invited me to a Tupperware party, I can't stand it. I'm not for the plastic. I'd say yes and then cancel on the morning, not realizing how much more damaging that is, because then the person has catered for you and they've cleaned their house. So if you have no intention of going to something, saying yes and then bagging out, oh, I'm sick, like people know that. Whereas now, this is a long time in the making, but the level of honesty, say like, Tupperware is not my jam. Have a great time. Thanks for inviting me. But if you have a candle party, I'm so there. And it's going to take a while to get to that. But, just being honest rather than saying yes when you're going to say no later, or turning up and buying all this stuff that you just don't ever want. Like another friend had some sort of party and I was like, look, I'm not interested in that in any way, shape, or form. But if you need like bums in seats because you get a prize for people attending, like I'll come, but I'm not buying anything. And she's like, oh yeah, no, so just starting to communicate like love you, not interested in that product. So, because the thing is, when you keep saying no, I'm not saying you have to explain yourself, but if you keep saying no to everything, the person might think, oh, that they don't like them or whatever, when really it's like, I'm not interested in horror movies or Tupperware or whatever. So it's kind of like starting to communicate what you do like, so you can find a middle ground. So it's not them always acquiescing and do what you want, but it's not you always going and doing things and ending up with a cupboard full of Tupperware that you never use.
Exactly. And that's okay. That's okay. And there's bounds. Well, and think about that in relationships too. There's just that balance, like in a marriage with your children, about give and take in the season that you're in. Like, how much you want to take on, how much you can take on. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. So Suzanne, I have another question for you, and then I want to let you pitch about where people can find more Suzanne Culberg so people can know how to work with you. But what is something that we have either talked about in this conversation today, or even just maybe something in your journey to being a no mom, and not a maid and a martyr, in your journey that's just really stuck with you and just really just resonated with you, whether it's something someone said to you, or maybe a truth that you've just figured out in your journey that could be an encouraging thought to our listeners as we wind down this conversation.
That is a brilliant question. So when you start to do new things, or at least I've experienced as an adult, that you learn a new skill or something, our brain can go to beating ourselves up for, oh, if I'd only known this earlier, or how things could have been different if I'd done this, especially if you have subsequent children, like, the things that you learn on your oldest, your second or subsequent children benefit from. So something that really helps me with that is your best gets better. Like, you're always doing your best, like, in whatever way, shape or form. In this season, this is the best that I have capacity for. This is the best that I can offer. This is the best that I'm available for. And in other seasons, you might have more capacity, or you might have wisdom that you've learned. So your best gets to get better. That doesn't discount what the effort that you put in before, because you were doing your best up until that point. But then when you learn more, or you do more, or you learn lessons from failure, and I think we should be really embracing the term failure rather than trying to write down. Like, look at young children. How often do they fail trying to learn to walk? But it's the strength that they grow every time they fall down to pull themselves back up that eventually gets them walking and then running. So it's like, everything that doesn't work out how you hoped, it's like suboptimal, I like that much better than failure, gives you a lesson that gets you improve the best effort that you make, and your best gets better. So it's kind of like, this is the best I have today. Next week, it might be different. And it just, for me, has taken a lot of the pressure off and a lot of the guilt, especially, preparing kids for things, or the first time a child has to give a speech. Like, I'm just saying that because my children tried out for the student leader council yesterday, and it's the pressure on them and the pressure on you, and it's like, oh, and my son, he benefits so much from what I learnt with my daughter going through the same thing. But in both cases, I did my best.
Absolutely. I like that. Your best is still your best. So, Suzanne, where can we find more of Suzanne Culberg?
Best place to find me is my website. So suzanneculberg.com, SuzanneCulberg, because people are like, oh, Culberg, it's an interesting spelling. There you'll find my newsletter, my podcast. I've got my own podcast now. And you can, if you want to contact me at all, and this is the boundaries person being really honest, I am email all the way, baby. So if you click on my newsletter, and then it will sign you up, and then you can respond to any of them. I will respond to them, but I don't do the DMs. And it's so funny because people are like, oh, you can't grow a business without DMs. I'm like, watch me. And this is a personal choice, because one day my son said to me, you love your phone more than me. And in that moment, my life changed. And I was like, why am I so married to this? So I've taken everything off, and I have it on my computer, and I respond when I respond, because I think the digital age has given us many gifts, but it's also given us many, obligations that we don't need to have. So yeah, I don't DM.
Yeah. Well, and that's interesting. I'm in a season where I'm a mom and I'm a caregiver, and lots of times I don't, except for my office hours, I'm not on the computer. And so I kind of have to work sometimes, especially if crap hits the fan and my husband has a seizure, he's done for the rest of the day. That means I'm not going to get anything done for the rest of the day. But if there's things I do want to at least touch on, maybe while my daughter naps, that's when I can do that on my phone. I can access
Yeah,
my
but that's
website.
what working for you.
Yeah.
So this
Yeah.
is the whole point of what,
Yeah.
looking
Yeah.
back to what we were
So,
talking about earlier. Whereas for me, I'm like, I came from a medical field. I
yeah.
think you did too. I was listening to one of your podcasts, and I'm
Yes.
like, there's
Yes.
no emergencies in coaching. Like if
Yeah.
somebody's like, oh my gosh, I need to get hold of you or whatever, and it's like, if you're having a true honest emergency, you need to go to the hospital.
Exactly.
Like whatever it is you have going on can wait till tomorrow or next session or whatever. So for me, it was like, if stuff's going down, I don't even want to be available on my phone. It can wait. But that's
Yeah.
my own boundary there.
Yeah. And that's okay. That's okay. So think about realistically, guys, as you're digesting everything that we've talked about today, think about what is realistic to you to find a healthy balance as a stay-at-home mom, as a caregiver. And if you're choosing to be a mompreneur like we are, what is the boundaries for those? I take Saturday and Sundays off. Your girl is not working on those days. No. So that's my boundary. Monday
I
through
love
Fridays
it.
are my days that I jam and your girl shows up. Saturday and Sundays, your girl's off. So that's fine. So anyway, Suzanne, thank you for being a guest on the Caregiver Coffee Chat podcast today. I truly enjoyed this conversation. You spoke to your girl in some helpful ways. And I really hope that for those of you who are listening to this replay on Spotify, Anchor, YouTube, wherever you're watching this from or listening to this from, that you're feeling encouraged and that you're not the only one that has ever gotten stuck in that mode of being a maid or a martyr as a mom or a caregiver. And we want to help you get out of that in 2023. And if you need some help, for example, with self-care or getting a routine around your home or managing your spouse's illness, my new workshop, How to Be a Prompt Mom and Caregiver in 2023, is released. It's out. But I am only giving free limited time access for this week. After that, price goes up. So through the time you're listening to this, if you go to my website, programs Melissa Miller 2011.com, you can sign up for my brand new workshop, How to Be a Prompt Mom and Caregiver in 2023. And I will be teaching my prompt method of how to prepare for the unexpected, how to reach out for support, how to get organized around your home, manage your busy schedule, prioritize your holistic self-care, mind, body, and soul, and tell your story to both heal and inspire others. Because as moms, as caregivers, we need that. We need to be able to be creative. We need to be able to heal and just acknowledge all the hard seasons that we have gone through, because it is traumatic and painful, but also just inspire and help others who are coming after us, because we know we all benefit in community. And so all the links to Suzanne's work and how to contact her via email and whatnot will be in the description box below. I can't talk yet, guys. Sorry. And also my website and my workshop, and also where you can find the podcast. But guys, just remember that you're not alone. You're doing the best you can. No one knows your family better than you do. And you're allowed to give yourself grace through those hard seasons as a mom, as a caregiver. So I will see you guys next week for another amazing episode of the Caregiver Coffee Chat podcast. And Suzanne, thank you again for being a guest.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.